The trees are hundreds of years old, the forest thousands of years, the waterfall eternal, and we little people are now used to thinking in stretches of the next 3 years, the next 5 years, hardly realizing how short-lived we have become. Virtually everything we take for granted is of quite recent origin. 100 years ago, the modern world had no steel, no electricity, no cement worth talking about. Even 30 years ago, the whole scale of our economic activities was relatively harmless, non-destructive. It's really only in the last 30 years that all these natural assets have become threatened. Now, this water has been flowing forever, and it is still clean, and it is still sweet. How long will it remain so? That will depend to a very large extent on what we do with the forests. We're in Western Australia, standing on the edge of the forest. Behind me, the primeval forest. In front of me, open land. Behind me, stability. In front of me, the vulnerable earth. Behind me, a diverse and complex ecosystem which it has taken 2,000 million years to build. In front of me, cleared ground, uncovered in a few moments by mechanized man. Some of the tallest trees on this earth, 200 feet high, protecting the understory, the forest floor, by filtering the harsh sunlight. The forest serene and unchanging, wilderness, the cradle of man, the cradle of life, the cradle of civilization. In front, the smitten forest, swept away by our heroic technology. All through the long, long history of the forest, it has been subjected to the most unbelievable pressures, but has survived. Though the Earth is 8,000 miles in diameter, the entire dry land life depends on the uttermost few centimeters of its soil, an incredibly thin life jacket. Germinating in this soil is a rich canopy of vegetation without which no animals or man could survive. This green mantle provides not only the food we eat, but the air we breathe and the water we drink. It is a layer over 2,000 million years old, which has changed and repaired itself throughout time without ever deteriorating. It is the system upon which we completely depend, and upon which we must continue to depend to the end of our days as a species. Health in a forest is not a matter of trees without blemish, of leaves without grubs and caterpillars, of faultless blossom and flowers. No, health is a matter of balance, of a system which has the power of regenerating itself, of surviving for centuries, millennia, great ecosystem with innumerable forms of life all supporting one another. And we never quite know what we're doing when we're removing any one of them. This lichen, one of the simplest living organisms of the forest, is in fact two organisms, an algae and a fungus. The algae, through its green chlorophyll, is able to take the sun's energy to make living cells from basic nutrients, but to do so it requires damp conditions. The fungus, which is quite unable to produce its own food, provides the matrix, the damp sponge for the algae, and in return shares its food. The forest is full of examples of living harmony, of interdependence between species, of interlocking pieces which support one another in life, which account for so much of the forest's stability. So a system to be looked at with awe and treated with the greatest degree of caution. Even dead wood plays a part in it. Let's have a look at it. Of course, the tidy human mind says dead wood should be removed as quickly as possible. But how dead is it? The wood may be dead, but it's full of life. Here on this piece we can identify probably 20, 30 different species of plants, lichens, mosses, little flowers, not to mention worms, insects. And here again, in miniature, an ecological system which is a necessary part of the whole and produces this mysterious effect that there are so many different varieties of life, that life always continues in spite of all vicissitudes, always regenerates itself, even improves itself in spite of many things that happen all the time. Now, one of the vicissitudes of life in the forest is man, and as long as he behaves as true to nature as the other natural forces, this great asset, this great wonderful thing will continue. But if he becomes too violent, too cocksure, and too selfish, then he will destroy the very basis of his own existence. Well, what do we see here? A scene of devastation. This is no longer a forest. This used to be a forest. It used to be like a temple. And now it looks like a battlefield. Abandoned machinery. Everything abandoned. How can this happen? Well, it happens when a forest is treated simply as a kind of quarry to get value out of it, pick the eyes out of the forest, make room for transport. What isn't of the highest value is abandoned, left lying around. It happens when man's thinking is ruled as the highest value by what you might call the religion of economics. Nothing else counts except turning things into cash. And the religion of economics is the enemy of all the things that humanity really cares for. Beauty, sympathy, harmony. The harmony that used to be represented in this forest. The irony of the matter is that when economics becomes a religion, when the economic calculus is put as the highest value, the behavior of men becomes extremely uneconomic from another point of view. I see nothing but wasted resources here. Resources which very likely in the future will be sorely missed. What is this? It's an attitude of the only thing that is worth economizing on is human labor. It's not worth getting this timber out. Too much labor. But labor is one of the things that we always have, and we have it for free. We have unemployment, we have surplus labor. The oil that is needed for these machines, we don't get for free. Once we've taken it, it's gone. So this religion of economics, far from being economically rational, is in the longer term very uneconomic. And these forests, they should teach us that there is a longer term. Many of these trees have survived for many, many hundreds of years. They are the oldest living beings on this earth. A tree is a three-dimensional solar energy collector. It's very much more than that. It's one of the great cleansing mechanisms, producing air for us to breathe. It's a system to hold the soil, to hold the water, even to clean the water or assure the cleaning of water. And strange to say, it seems that trees are one of the most abused presents that nature has given to this earth. It has been said that civilization has left footsteps behind, and these footsteps are deserts. This has been so for thousands of years. We are paying the price for it. The most luscious plains, landscapes have been turned in many parts of the world into rocky wastes where at best a few goats can survive. Why has it been so neglected? Perhaps because normally it takes a bit longer to grow a tree than to grow a crop. But then the tree lasts very much longer. And I think what is happening now, that we are collectively rediscovering that this is one of the greatest assets. What I think should be considered particularly attractive about trees also is the fact that tree establishment, tree planting is a very democratic kind of technology. Everybody can take a part in it. Everywhere there are bits of land that would be greatly improved if a tree would grow, and not just a humdrum tree, but an interesting tree and possibly a very productive tree. Tree belts are also very neglected to stop erosion, to increase the productivity of agriculture. It has been found that by planting tree belts, even though you lose a bit of land for agriculture, you increase yields with wheat perhaps by 15%, because the soil is kept in better conditions, the moisture is kept, the harsh winds are kept out. Where there are no forests, we should get into the habit of thinking and then of acting, that wherever there's an opportunity to establish a tree, let's do it. When I think of this great continental country, Australia. I could imagine that the future really rests with the establishment of more and more trees, the personalizing of this whole matter, because the tree is a living thing, and every living person ought to have a few trees named after him or after her. People haven't always loved their trees. They saw them as an obstruction. The forests had to make room for agriculture. Feeding comes first. So they destroyed the trees, they ring-barked them. Here we can see the monuments of men's struggle to make a living from the land. This is what it means getting forest land for agricultural purposes. We burn it. Modern agriculture and silviculture, with all its technical, mechanical and chemical aids, what does it mainly do? It reduces the vast variety of vegetation to monoculture. And as soon as we have monoculture, and the more monoculture we have, the more, again, the land becomes dependent on chemicals for its fertility. The life of the soil diminishes, and we need oil or natural gas to produce the substances which ought to be being produced by the bacteria in the soil. The soil becomes more and more dependent on man's inputs. It becomes a relatively dead soil, which cannot regenerate life the way it has been regenerating for many thousands of years. What happens when economic man enters the forest? If he doesn't remove it altogether, he modifies it. He takes the mature, best timber out into the timber mill. He burns the timber he doesn't want to keep the forest tidy. He suppresses plants, trees, shrubs which have no economic value, even to the point of introducing monoculture. When monoculture is introduced, that is to say, when only one crop is grown, then nature tends to lose her power of regeneration, of maintaining health in often very adverse climatic and other circumstances. The pine is not a native tree, and this is not a forest. It is a plantation, a kind of timber mine. A crop being grown for the market, the trees to be felled and replanted over and over again. This is the kind of intensive timber production unit which society virtually forces upon the country as long as it demands ever-increasing amounts of wood. And what is this wood used for? Primarily making newsprint, wrappings, one might say perhaps a bit nastily, the production of litter. Many doubts have been uttered whether this kind of monoculture can be sustained for a long time. It's a fairly new thing in Australia and nobody quite knows. Take a good look at this Jarrah. A Jarrah tree takes about 200 years to grow to maturity, and this one may well be up to 400 years old. It is the Eucalyptus marginata, or what used to be called West Australian mahogany. It yields a richly colored timber, varying in color from pink to deep red-brown. It is extremely hard and durable. It is recognized as one of the world's finest timbers. It has been the focus of production forestry. It has been cut down at a faster rate than the trees could grow back. Sustained overcutting has left these depleted forests with falling production rates. And these have brought a crisis within the timber industry and a chronic timber shortage. Throughout the region, sawmills will be closing down and men's jobs put in jeopardy. What is left of the Jarrah after the axe and the chainsaw have taken their heavy toll is being rapidly destroyed by a fungus known as dieback. As a result of human action, it has become one of the most serious epidemics in botanical history. It is at present destroying 10,000 acres of Jarrah annually, more efficiently than a bulldozer. The rate of this spread is not natural. It is being promoted by man's use of the forest. Firstly, all the prime healthy timber has disappeared off to the sawmills, leaving a greatly weakened forest behind. What remains is subject to periodic controlled burning, called cool burns, in order to prevent the buildup of dead timber and leaf litter from leading to severe bushfires. This fire management, however, is inadvertently changing the nature of the forest understory. By stimulating the germination of banksia seeds, the cool burns are leading to an increase of this species in the forest understory. Banksia fosters dieback in its masses of fine hair-like roots which serve as a launching pad for the new sites of infection. These same fires also dramatically reduce the numbers of the wattle bushes, which have certain microorganisms associated with their roots which are actually antagonistic to the dieback fungus. After a hot fire, such as is found in natural conditions, wattles would produce a dense understory. But the cool burn is not hot enough to stimulate germination. In short, a natural, stable symbiosis has been interfered with, producing quite unexpected results. Take a good look at a mature, healthy Jarrah, one of the world's finest timbers. To our grandchildren, it may be no more but a paragraph in an encyclopedia. What a tree! When Newton had an apple falling on his head, he wondered why the apple fell down. If he had wondered how the apple got to the top in the first place, we might have a different physics. What a feat of engineering. What a tonnage of material that has been brought up there against all the laws of gravity. If we knew this, we wouldn't have an energy problem. Certainly, a force that we know very little about, perhaps its solar energy, was able to lift tons and tons of weight, of substance to this height. It's quite incredible. This is King Karri, one of the forest giants of this planet. It grows only in a relatively small area of the forests of Western Australia. The timber it yields is immensely strong, long-grained and dense. As a structural timber, it has few equals. Because the log is so straight and long, the limits to the length of planks or beams that can be cut from it are determined by the handling capacity of our mills and logging equipment. The karri of Western Australia, this splendid hardwood, is now being used as a resources supply for the Japanese paper pulp industry. These giant hardwoods are being reduced to wood chips, cleared in an operation known as clear felling. Clear felling is the latest advance in intensive production forestry. Instead of only the mature trees of a forest being singled out for selective felling, the whole forest is cut down. In coops of 200 hectares, every living thing is removed, with the exception of a single seed tree every acre. The effects that such a large-scale clearing operation will have on the forests of Australia is unknown. It has never been attempted before. The size of the coops and the rate at which they're being cleared has been made possible by the development of massive capital-intensive labor-saving technology. Clear felling for intensive production forestry is now operating, or schemes are proposed, for almost every state in Australia. In this area of Western Australia, about 35 square kilometers is to be cleared each year for the next 30 years. This is tree farming on a massive scale. It is typical of what is happening in forests not only in the rest of Australia, but throughout the world. The forestry people throughout the world, at least all those that I've ever met, love their forests and live for them. How is it then that there's so much damage? That we have reason to fear that the earth gets denuded, can't breathe anymore. The deserts grow. Well, it's not the forestry people. If they had their own way, we would have, as far as forests are concerned, a conserver society. But they are under pressures. And where do the pressures come from? They come from all of us. They come from society at large. They are forced to adopt policies because government says this is a national asset, an economic asset, it must pay. This is a source of export. This is a source for trips, for making newsprint. It will take 400 years for the forest to replace that log. Surely we owe it to our great-great-grandchildren to see that the use to which the timber is put will last at least until its replacement is ready to be felled. The whole question of the forests is a question for all of us, for society at large. Will we be able to become a conservative society, conscious that we're part of nature, or are we going to continue to remain a rapacious society? This is one of the biggest sawmills in the southern hemisphere. The question we have to raise is that a sawmill of the future? It isn't. A mill like this would take in about 200 tons of logs daily and produce 70 tons of sawn timber. It's a very low rate of utilization, not even counting all the logs that are left in the forest, because they don't quite fit, they may be crooked, they may be not quite the right quality for this type of operation. Of course, the sawmill owners are making very great efforts to find use for these 70%, and they're not unsuccessful. All the same, it's not a mill which fits into the conditions of the future. It's not a mill which is very attractive to labor. Mills like that have a labor turnover of 75% or thereabouts a year. Smaller mills employing 20 people, the decentralized production, are happier places. There's more human contact, and conditions can be greatly better than in the big mills. Also, the transport problem is greatly eased. Now all this is becoming increasingly relevant for the future, with fuel prices what they are, and particularly with fuel prices what they're going to be. We can't go on burning and wasting such very large percentage of this precious resource. Perhaps what will even be required is to make new design studies and design mills specifically for the new conditions that have to be faced. If we put our minds to it, we can design very efficient small mills with excellent labor conditions and a really high rate of utilization of the timber. The trees behind me, karri trees of that size and age you can see only in Western Australia. Are we even entitled to just take them out of the forest and use them? I think we are. I think we are entitled to use all of nature's gifts, but on two conditions. First of all, that our forest management should be such that the asset itself, the forest, is not destroyed. And secondly, that the use to which such rare timber is put should be in an adequate relationship to the rareness and magnificence of this timber. If on a modest and thoughtful scale we exploit the karri tree for structural purposes, maintaining the health of the forest, that first condition is fulfilled. If we use it for minor purposes, for which many other things can be used, purposes that do not in any sense have the uniqueness of that which we use, as for instance for chips, then I think we are committing something that might almost be called obscene. Are we in favor of progress? Of course we're in favor of progress. But what is progress? What is real progress? It's not progress to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. No, real progress is an improvement in the quality of people, the quality of the environment, the power we develop to appreciate. That's real progress. We do ourselves great harm when we lose the vertical perspective. I mean, we must always remain conscious of the fact that the world is a great system of levels: mineral, plant, animal, man, and as all people in all parts of the world have always known, until quite recently, powers higher than man. Virgin nature always reminds us of these higher powers. It shows us marvels and mysteries far beyond anything man can do. If our actions just mean destroying the very possibilities of progress, the very assets, in other words, the goose that lays the golden egg, then we are an impermanent inhabitant on this world. And during the last 30 years, our activities have become more and more destructive. We are engaged in a battle with nature. And if perchance we should win the battle, we will find ourselves on the losing side. To work with nature, this is a very subtle matter. It requires a great deal of understanding how nature works. Now, nature has achieved permanence. There is no doubt about that. Our economics at present are very impermanent. Look at it. We have interfered to such an extent that waters are polluted, resources run out, and so on. So our real task is to develop the thoughts, the understanding that could be called the economics of permanence. It can be said that we are now far too clever to be able to survive without wisdom. When we were much less clever, we couldn't do much damage. Now we have powerful tools, bulldozers, and if we don't treat our environment with the tenderness it requires to remain alive, we just ruin it. Now, wisdom in economics, what does it mean? It means never losing sight of the fact that we mean to be permanent inhabitants of this world. Wisdom requires that we make a very strict distinction between what in fact are capital and exhausting assets and what is genuine income. Now, a capital asset from this point of view, for instance, is the oil. To rejoice in an increase in oil consumption is to rejoice in suicide. It's unwise to use up an irreplaceable asset. We want it for a long, long time. The forest itself is also a non-renewable asset, unless it is treated with that tenderness that I've spoken about. Unless we are not misled by our power tools and become power drunk. Unless we adjust the rate of take to the rate of regrowth, and not only for the forest as a whole, but also attuning it to the proper age mixture of the trees. It will not be easy to learn wisdom in our economic behavior, but we still have some time, and without learning it, I'm sure as a race we can be classified with the species threatened with extinction.
Shortly after his visit to Australia to make this film, Ernest Friedrich Schumacher died in Switzerland on the 4th of September 1977. In his book, Small is Beautiful, he concluded with these words: "Everywhere, people ask, what can I actually do? The answer is as simple as it is disconcerting. We can, each one of us, work to put our own inner house in order. The guidance we need for this cannot be found in science or technology, the value of which utterly depends on the ends they serve, but it can still be found in the traditional wisdom of mankind."